Welcome into the EMAW Online podcast as we get set on this Monday, January 30th. Just me for the time being. I don't know if we're going to see Alec at all today or if we just have to go without him because he is dealing with an internet outage as we speak. So shout out to his wonderful internet provider for being down for him. Fortunately for me, I have mine, even though I saw complaints all weekend long from my neighbors saying that they were without internet. But I was one of the few that was able to hang on to it all. So it'll just be me flying solo for the main part of this, something that I've already done a couple times this year. And no doubt that we'll have a lot to talk about because K-State came away with another victory this weekend. They beat Florida. It was a pretty ho-hum game. There really wasn't a ton to it. They got out to a big lead. They took the drama out of the game early, which I actually think is a really impressive thing that they did because I was a little concerned that the game would be similar to how the Texas Tech game played out, where they kind of played with their food for a little bit. They had a battle, but fortunately they were able to just go out, kind of put the hammer down early. The only real concern that there was at any point was out of the halftime break, they didn't score for the first 4 minutes, and Florida was able to cut the lead down pretty easily. But K-State was eventually able to work the lead back up over 20, and they ultimately cruised in their win on Saturday. So a solid win for K-State. The best news, I think, out of it is the fact that they contributed to a very successful weekend for the Big 12. The Big 12 goes 7-3 in the final Big 12 SEC Challenge. So a couple things that means. It means that the Big 12 has won the challenge more times than the SEC did in the entirety of it. The Big 12 also, by way of that, has won more games in the challenge's history. And then it was a dominant performance that they put forth this weekend. And, if Mike Miles doesn't get hurt for TCU, there's a really good chance that the Big 12 is sitting at 8-2, and that would have been one heck of a weekend. The props need to be given to the Big 12 teams that had to go on the road. That was a tough situation. Alec and I talked about it last week, and you look at how the challenge lined up. The Big 12, the teams that you didn't want going on the road, or, it made more sense, like most of the ranked teams were on the road. K-State was one of the few that was at home, them and Baylor. But Iowa State had to go to Missouri. That was a dicey game, but Iowa State understood that. We've talked about that too, where they were pretty adamant, or at least up front, that Caleb Grill probably wasn't going to play in that game. So I kind of get why that happened with Iowa State. I think that was a predictable one. TCU having to go on the road, that was a tough situation, and again, made even tougher by the fact that Mike Miles ends up going out with an injury, and that'll be something to monitor, is seeing how Mike Miles is, because TCU is supposed to be coming to Manhattan next week, and that's a big rematch for those two sides. So we're going to have to see how that ends up working out for K-State and TCU if that ends up being an injury that lingers for Mike Miles or keeps him out for any extended period of time. But KU had to go on the road as well. And even though Kentucky has, kind of faltered this year, they have been playing better as of late. And that was a tough situation for KU, who had lost 3 games in a row, then to have to go on the road to a Kentucky team that's playing better and desperately needed a big win. And the Jayhawks were able to take care of business. So they did what they needed to do for the Big 12. And that was impressive. Then the teams in the league that also deserve major props, West Virginia took control fairly early in their game against Auburn. They let Auburn get back into it, but finished it off. That was a significant win. And then also the best win of the weekend probably belongs to Oklahoma, who just absolutely housed Alabama. Didn't even give them a chance in that game. And that's one of those things that I've referred to with, I like Alabama. I love the way Nate Oates has his teams play basketball. I love when teams just let it fly and send 3 after 3 towards the basket. The problem you're going to have with that when you rely so much on that style of play is sometimes the well is going to run dry, and the well, it ran dry on Saturday. And that's why, and nobody really cares about this because it's the SEC and whatever else, but that's why I don't see Alabama actually winning a national title when Nate Oates. They could string together 4 really good games. They've done it this year. They've done it in years past, and they could be a Final Four team, but they are the candidate. They are one of the best teams in the country. But if you had asked me, who in the top 25 could get beaten by 30 the easiest, I would have told you Alabama, because we've seen them do it in years past. But it is what it is for Alabama. So a great win for Oklahoma, and according to Joe Lunardi, that put them back in the NCAA tournament. So Lunardi has Oklahoma into the tournament. That gives the Big 12 8 teams again. Also, good to see Texas Tech get a win in the Big 12 SEC Challenge because they needed a little bit of a booster. That team's too good to be in the position they're in right now. Unfortunately, the Big 12 is just a monster this year, and they aren't strong enough to withstand it. But they were able to go out of the league, flex their muscle, get a road win at LSU. So that was a big deal for them. Now, for K-State and what they were able to do over the weekend, I think because they got out to such a big lead early and Florida was terrible. I mean, K-State's defense played a pretty significant role in why Florida looked so bad in the game on Saturday. But Florida also is a bad offensive team that had to face a team that played great defense. And then on top of that, Florida went on to have a horrendous performance offensively. And I think because of that, maybe it masks some of the issues that K-State had in that game. But K-State wasn't very good from three in the game. And overall, they really struggled offensively. Like, I mean, it all ends up working out fine. They win 64-50 and everything. But they shot under 24% from three. They were bad at the free throw line again, something that kind of doomed them in Ames. So there were some issues there. But in games like what happened on Saturday, when you're playing an inferior opponent and you have to take a break from conference play, I'm actually okay if you just get out of there with a win. As we've seen in other circumstances, like that's just the best outcome that you can hope for. I don't really care who you're playing. Just don't screw anything up and you're fine. And K-State was able to do that. And in addition to doing that, I thought took care of some things that needed to be fixed from the game against Iowa State. I mean, we discussed pretty heavily what the issues were, and a lot of them came inside for K-State. But they end up turning the ball over less, only 12 giveaways in the game. Florida ends up getting 12 points, though, off of those turnovers. So still a point for every turnover, basically, is what K-State's given up. And then the second chance points, K-State was much better in that regard as well. 6 second chance points for Florida. One other thing to note, though, for K-State is they are not getting second chance points themselves. And that's what's also contributed to them getting beaten so badly in those situations. They only had 2 on Saturday, despite 11 offensive rebounds, and that's a number that's going to have to go up a little bit. But K-State did a good job in a lot of regards, limiting their turnovers, and then, again, not giving up such easy second chance buckets, and that's really the main thing that they had to get fixed. Now, the question is, can they do that against more superior talent? And that's what we're going to wait to find out and see. Certainly one of the things that helped him out in that regard was having David Gasson back on Saturday. He gets back out there. He gets a little bit of action early in the game, plays, I think 11 minutes in the first half is what he got. Yeah, 11 minutes in the first half. Looked pretty solid, pretty normal. He gave him a good offensive output. He ends up with 9 points in that first half, and so you feel like things are going pretty well. And then he ends up going down with an ankle injury. He walks off kind of holding his right ankle. Around the 16:03 mark, I think is what it was in the second half. It triggered a TV timeout. The good news was he came back into the game and was able to finish things out, and ultimately ends up playing, I think, 19 minutes is what he ended up logging. So they weren't like overboard with what he did in the game, but they did give him close to a more normal circumstance, and I thought it worked out well, and we can see why David Gasson is such an important piece. Another thing that it just kind of illuminated was Bebe Isiola only played 5 minutes in the game on Saturday. So the amount of action that he has seen to start Big 12 play is an anomaly based off of what K-State anticipated and what they actually want to do. But he's been out there by necessity because when you don't have Gasson, who hadn't played since the Radford game until he got in, not against Iowa State, but in the game prior against Texas Tech, like it was significant to have all that kind of play out for him. And they obviously, I think Bebe Isiola serves a good role on this team. Like, and I think he's comfortable with it, but he doesn't have the talent to be out there on a consistent basis. And certainly K-State's at a disadvantage if he's having to play high minutes. And that's kind of where he was in a 15 to 20 minute range. Now you get to substitute that with David Gasson, who, even not at full strength yet, got close to 20 minutes on Saturday. And he said after the game, he didn't feel like his conditioning was there all the way yet. He said he thought it would take a couple more practices. The only concerning thing about that is that there's really only the opportunity for 2 days in between playing Kansas on Tuesday. So you probably still won't see what David Gasson would consider to be himself at full strength on Tuesday. But the good news is it looks like he will be useful in that game, and that will give K-State a little bit of a wrinkle that they didn't have the last time that they played Kansas. They didn't have David Gasson, so they have something new to kind of throw it at the Jayhawks and give them a little look at. And I think that's going to be a significant thing for K-State to add Gasson into the fold. And we'll see. I thought he helped out on defense a lot, just having a guy in there that, again, he's not like the physical post defender that K-State kind of needs at times. They just don't have one of those this year, but he's certainly going to give them a boost. And I think depending on how many minutes he can give them, like he's going to do wonders for K-State tomorrow when they take on Kansas in defending KJ Adams, who had a really good game the first time against K-State. So significant to have David Gasson back. He looks solid, seemed to have a little bit of a scare in there, but he gets back and everything looks to be solid and on the uptick for David Gasson. So it was good to get him back. Other things that took place in the game, you kind of got a balanced performance. I mean, the high scores in the game was 13 points. That's a little bit of a lower scoring game, but Noel and Johnson end up with 13 points each. Marquise Noel was a little bit more efficient with his, and he did a lot in this game. He had 9 rebounds, 8 assists. There was triple-double watch for Noel. Ultimately didn't come to fruition, but he did put together a strong performance, and it was good to see him have a stronger game because over the last couple of weeks, he's had some really good moments still, but he's also had some moments where he's not necessarily been at the level that he had been at. And like I said, when it was going on, you don't expect Noel to continue what he's doing, but and then when I say that, what he was doing, like the 30 points against Texas and Baylor and everything else, but you would expect a little bit more out of him. So it was a little uncharacteristic how some things had played out. So it was good to see him be more efficient, play what seemed to be more along the lines of what his game will typically be. Keontae Johnson's a little bit of an interesting one. He wasn't the most efficient on Saturday. He ends up taking 16 shots, only makes 5 of them, ends up with 13 points and 11 rebounds still. So a double-double, and he continued to haul in boards, which are important for this K-State team. But Keontae Johnson's been a little bit of an oddity the last couple of games because Johnson struggled. It looked against Iowa State, took a little bit to get going in that one. He also had, some stretches like that against at TCU. It took him a little bit. He was a little off there. He had 7 turnovers against TCU. I think that's the concerning thing right now is I don't necessarily know what it is that is getting to him. My one thought, though, would be that Keontae Johnson's going to have to work and fight pretty good over this last half stretch of the season. And there may be some games where he's just kind of out of it and a little lethargic because he's a guy that has not played a season of basketball in 3 years. I mean, the last full season of basketball he played was the 2019-2020 season. He played 4 games of 2021-22, and then he didn't play at all last year. So that's going to be the thing to kind of keep your eyes on. Or I guess it was the 1920 and then 2021 and then 21-22. He sat it out. So he's kind of like a freshman, honestly, at this point, where you hear people talk about the freshman wall that gets hit at times. I think that could be a part of it where he's just having to get his body retrained to be ready for the long haul of a college basketball season. That's significant. And maybe also there's an element to it of just, finding a better balance. Like we know Jerome Tang wants to get him the ball a lot. He mentioned it after plenty of games this year where he's like, hey, the best coaches get the ball to their best player. And K-State certainly wants to do that. But I think there's a matter of making sure that things get paced out in a better manner. So don't necessarily overload the workload for Keontae Johnson and force him to have to worry maybe about making more plays when he dribbles the basketball because he's not the greatest ball handler at times. It just looks like maybe he's not the most confident in his dribble, has to focus on that a little bit more, gets him into some trouble. So I think K-State's going to have to work some things out there and maybe try and ease the workload, make it look like it's just a more clean process. And that's the thing they had going early on in the season where even though Keontae Johnson was putting up great numbers, and really still is on the season, like the numbers are still very good. They also got a stellar performance from him the first time they played Kansas. But I think that they are going to have to just find a way to get back in that part where it looks seamless, to where it doesn't seem forced. And I think that's the one thing that we've maybe seen the last couple of games. And like I said, Florida game notwithstanding, but the last four conference games, Keontae Johnson's had 5, 4, 2, and 7 turnovers. So he's just going to have to be cleaner there. And I think making sure they manage him a little bit better. The good news is we saw in the first however many conference games of the season, I guess it would have been the first 4, he played at least 36 minutes in every single one of those games, and including Texas and Baylor, where he's really taxed. Same for TCU. But he's been able to get significant rest since that point where he's gotten to sit for at least 5 minutes or more of game time in each of the previous 4 games. So K-State is doing a little bit more to get him a break. It seems like Jerome Tang mixing guys in and out a little bit better now, trying to find more areas where he can get a blow for Marquise Noel or Keontae Johnson, even if it's not forever. But he's being able to find a way to kind of trust his guys, give them a better shot. And obviously David Gasson returning gives them a pretty big boost in that category as well. So that's a good shot for what they're going to give. And ultimately we'll see if it pays in the long run. So that was some of the stuff from the Florida game. And like I said, I really don't have a ton of crazy takeaways from the game because it was a pretty ho-hum game. Like it was just nothing crazy that went on and nothing out of the ordinary that ends up taking place. But I think they're, taking care of business against inferior opponents is really the most important thing to me. Like maybe it's from watching sports all these years and I don't have a ton of teams that just plow through people that I follow along. So maybe you're just always waiting for that hammer to fall in a little bit of a letdown. So I think anytime that you can go out against a team that you're perceived that you should go out and beat and take care of, anytime you do, that's fine with me. I don't care what the number is because as we saw this weekend, Oklahoma was absolutely supposed to take care of, or Alabama was absolutely supposed to take care of Alabama or Alabama, Oklahoma. Doing this by myself and with a cold is killing me right now. But Alabama was supposed to take care of Oklahoma. They did not do that. They did the opposite of that. So moving forward now, like K-State, fortunately for them, like they got a lot of games still that they're going to have to be fully locked in for. But we are going to see games like that again, where when they go on the road to Texas Tech in a couple weeks, like that's going to be one of those where you have to make sure, even though that there's a bunch of stuff that's going on and Tech isn't very good, you're going to have to be ready for it. So just find ways to win games that you should and be ready to put together a great performance in the really tough games. Of the really tough games that are out there, that will include what's going to take place on Tuesday in Allen Fieldhouse. K-State going on the road to take on KU. Pretty quick turnaround between these two teams seeing each other again. It was just 2 weeks ago that K-State was able to win in Bramlage against the Jayhawks. A pretty significant deal, and we'll have to see kind of what comes up from that. Like I said, battling a little bit of a cold right now, so trying to make sure I don't cough all over the stream for you guys. So we'll see what it ends up doing. The one notable thing here is K-State and KU. This is K-State's first repeat opponent of the season, so that's a notable deal. Other things to take into consideration this game. We talked about David Gasson, who's going to be back for K-State. But one of the things that has stood out about KU recently is they are starting to try and play around. And Bill Self has really been doing this all year, where he's trying to find who the guy off the bench he can trust is. And it seems like, based off of what has taken place, that a guy that got an uptick in minutes against Kentucky. Now, this is a little different because of how Kentucky is set up and what they needed, but it will be interesting to see how it works out here. Ernest Udeh Jr. got 12 minutes of action over the weekend in Lexington. He didn't do anything crazy, 4 points, 2 boards, but he did what they needed out of him. Prior to that game against Kentucky, the most minutes he had played in a game this year was on December 1st against Seton Hall. That's the last time he was over 10 minutes played in a game. He put up 13 minutes in that one. And then he only has 3 other games this year where he's played more than 10 minutes. And they were all the first 3 games of the season against Omaha, North Dakota State, and Duke. So KU is trying to find some new wrinkles and trying to find guys that they can work in to their rotation and see what they can do. So it's going to be fascinating to see just how different these two teams look tomorrow night as opposed to the first game that they played. The one thing we know is that Jalen Wilson is still on his tear that he started against K-State. He's been their leading scorer in 3 of their last 4 games dating back to that game in Manhattan, where he's put up 38, 30, and 22 to lead his team. So he's doing good things there. And then also, it just seems like a 3-game losing streak to Kansas, like that puts some things into perspective for them, and they can go back to the drawing board and work on it a little bit more. So I expect a little bit of a different team that K-State ends up facing on Tuesday. Now, one of the things that, and I'm going to highlight this before tomorrow's game on EMAW Online, but one of the things that's going to be significant to watch in this rematch between the two teams is that there were some guys or statistical outliers the first time the two teams played. So, for example, K-State only got 4 points out of Marquise Noel the first time they played. Noel also in that game didn't hit a 3. That's significant because he's kind of the main provider of that category for K-State. So that was significant to note in everything that took place. Other things that stood out about it was, K-State made their free throws. So that's a positive that worked out for K-State on the outlier side. But that's one of those things where I don't know that K-State's going to shoot 80% at the line again, and I don't know that they're going to get to go to it 33 times tomorrow. So where are you going to be able to make up for that? On the flip side, you also had Grady Dick. He went 1 of 8 from 3. That doesn't seem likely to happen again. And KU as a team shot 21% from 3 in the game. That they gave K-State essentially 12 extra misses off of threes because K-State was 7 of 17 from 3. KU was 6 of 29. So K-State got some extra possessions and benefited from some poor shooting from KU in that game. It's another one of those things that just stands out to you that you go, I don't know that K-State's going to be able to have that happen again. And some of that was good K-State defense. I thought they locked in and did good enough. I mean, I know the final score doesn't present that, but I did think they did a decent enough job and took some things away that KU wanted, but you're just not going to get that again. Other things to kind of expect is Kevin McCullough didn't do anything in that game for Kansas in Manhattan, and he's obviously not one of the go-to guys. I mean, that's Wilson and Dick, but I don't know that you're going to get a just total performance out of him. He fouled out in Manhattan, and he turned the ball over twice, and he didn't score in the game, and he really only took 2 shots. So that was just a bad performance all around from him. You're just not going to get that again. So watching for that and seeing kind of how it works out with some of the outliers we saw. Also, Naquan Tomlin had a double-double. He had 15 and 10 against KU, and making sure that you find different ways to maybe be more consistent. And this game's going to be won differently by either team than what we saw the first time they played. So some statistical outliers there. That is a significant thing to keep in mind when K-State is taking on KU come tomorrow. So we'll see where it ends up going from there. Other thoughts about this game and this rematch. Anybody that's watched K-State for an extended period of time, you know that there's one thing that they have to really take into consideration and focus on, and that's making sure that you don't get rattled because you're playing at Allen Fieldhouse. I mean, there is going to be a moment in that game or at some point where you start to feel like, oh, this game is maybe leaking away from them. This K-State team's got to be able to find a way to fight through that. At home, sometimes they're able to do so because the crowd is on your side. You feel a little bit more comfortable. But I think teams in the past at K-State have, I don't know, maybe gotten caught up in that moment a little bit and just they feel everything that's going on. They feel the pressure. They feel a lot of the other stuff happening. I will say one of the things, though, that this team seems to have in its favor that other teams have not is that now they've all played in this game. That obviously is the truth. But entering the season, only 2 guys had really been a part of it, Noel and Masood. Now, I thought we saw it in game one. That K-State team went out there, and even though it was a big game, they knew how big it was and how important it was. They also didn't treat it like anything grander than that. I think there's a tendency for K-State teams in the past to feel like we got to go out there and just so many thoughts going through their head that they can tense up. It can make things really tough for them. And I don't think that we saw that as much in the game the first time around in Manhattan. I thought it was actually surprising because we saw KU, it looked like to me, be the team that stood out as maybe being a little bit on edge, a little concerned about what's going on, and maybe a little shocked and unready for what was going to hit them. And I think that's one of the things that's maybe led to this KU team being susceptible early on is they don't necessarily have like a guy right now that I think can keep them calm. I think Jalen Wilson's a good player, but I don't know that he can keep them calm and just kind of make everybody feel at ease. Right now, this KU team is just looking at him and saying, hey, help us, save us, do something for us. Whereas past, I think they've had guys that can basically take it over and say, hey, we're going to be all right. They can handle stuff like that. But they were the ones that looked shell-shocked the first time. And I'll be interested to see if this K-State team can bring that same mentality the second time around playing them and also doing it on the road in Allen Fieldhouse. The one benefit that K-State has is some of the guys they are going to rely on have played in big environments and big venues before and against teams of the status of Kansas. I mean, Keontae Johnson at Florida played against Kentucky, so he gets that. Ish Massoud was at Wake Forest, so he's been in the ACC. He knows what it's like to play Duke in North Carolina. The same type of thing for David Gasson, who was at Virginia Tech and got the same type of treatment and knows what's going on. And so that's a benefit to this team. And I think that's one of those areas where they can be a little bit more well-prepared and ready. And I mean, a dude like Marquise Noel, this is where there are a lot of benefits to what's gone on in this past now, where he got to experience it last year in Allen Fieldhouse. So he already knows what it's like. He can get over the first time there and whatever else. He knows what to expect now. In addition to that, and maybe this gets him in trouble. Maybe he presses too much, but he didn't have a great game the first time that they played Kansas. And I think he's going to want to go out and do what he can against them and try and help K-State get over the hump. So I do think there are some things working in K-State's favor still, and it's going to be interesting to kind of monitor and see how they handle everything that takes place tomorrow. So we're going to follow along with that. We're going to keep an eye on some of those things and ultimately see where this process ends up for K-State. Now, one of the other things they did the last time that they played Kansas, they had the lead for over 35 minutes of the game. I don't know that they're going to be able to do that, but we'll have to monitor it and see what we can do and how we watch the Wildcats perform tomorrow night. And like I said, this team I think is different. I think it helps to have a bunch of guys that come from different places. This is their second stop or third stop, depending on the guy. And it really doesn't impact them one way or the other with what they're seeing out there. So I think that's important. I think having the guys that come in, and K-State is the first place they are, and they've had this thing built up and beaten into them so many times about how important it is and how, you can't do this there, whatever. I think that can mess with somebody's head. I think it helps to have a bunch of dudes that like they're transplants that are here and they can go into these games a little bit more fearless than what teams in the past have. One other thing that I think benefits K-State, not just in this game against Kansas, because we saw it the first time against the Jayhawks, K-State outscored KU 31-8 with bench points. K-State has some serious depth. We are starting to see the depth for K-State build even more. And I mentioned, obviously, David Gasson coming back is very significant. That is a big deal to see how that's gone on. But also, if we go and we look around at some of the other things that have come about for K-State now, Ish Massoud has become consistent. He's now shooting over 50% from three on the season, or still is, because he's been doing that for a while at this point. That's a big deal. We know Desi Sills can come off the bench and provide a spark and carry the load. I mean, he had 24 against Kansas. Like, if he can do that, at any point he can step up. Again, these aren't just like KU things that can help you out there. And now another big benefit is Cam Carter has kind of turned it on, and he's following through and being a more consistent player. I think that deserves a lot of attention for what he did last week in those two games where, again, he hasn't been some world beater, but what he has done in the games against Iowa State and Florida was something he wasn't doing early in the season. He was finishing consistently when he got near the basket as opposed to getting shots up but not really having anything fall. And he's hit a couple of threes on the catch and shoot that have come in important moments and kind of setting the tone. And anytime you have a guy that can do that and can fit into the offense and just make things run smoothly, it's a boost to you, but also it makes you a lot tougher to defend. So I think that K-State's depth development over the last couple of games continues to rise, where obviously it was, I think Ish Massoud was the first one that kind of hit it. Now Desi Sills got the big pop against Kansas with 24. And now we've started to see really Cam Carter and David Gasson arrive at the same time, with Gasson coming back from injury and Carter getting on track with maybe starting to be a more efficient offensive player. Now, he's not going to be a huge participant in a lot of games, but because there's more guys talented offensively, but the fact that he's providing them consistency and kind of coming through when they need him now, that's important, because that's what you need outside of your top couple of guys. The other dudes that are on the floor, you don't have to be world beaters. Just know your role and settle in. And when you're called upon, every once in a while, come through and make a play. And that's why I've been impressed with Cam Carter recently. So that's all significant. And we'll have to see how it plays out tomorrow if he can keep on track against Kansas, because the first time he played against them, he played 26 minutes, 5 points. He was 1 of 6 from the field. So he really struggled in that game a little bit, had a couple turnovers as well, and foul trouble stacked up on him. So we'll have to monitor and see how that ends up working out. A couple of other things from today. K-State in the top 25. They slid only 2 spots, so that's a big deal for them. They get the respect they deserve. I mean, a tough road game against Iowa State. They don't drop a massive amount, only the 2 spots, so they are now number 7 in the country. They remain the highest-ranked team in the Big 12 right now, 1 spot ahead of Kansas, who moved up. So it will be number 7 K-State at number 8 Kansas tomorrow. First time since 2013 that K-State is the higher-ranked team in Allen Fieldhouse. I know some people were a little bit surprised to see that K-State that recently had been the higher-ranked team in Allen Fieldhouse. Other teams in the top 25 for the Big 12, Texas stays at number 10, Baylor at 11, Iowa State at 13, and TCU at 15. So the Big 12 has 6 teams in the top 25. They are all inside the top 15. That is a significant deal as this league continues just to put on a very, very impressive performance. Other notes, and we'll have a full update on the site tomorrow that people can go and enjoy. We're going to start doing this to keep everything in one place because everybody loves bracketology and following along with it. Every Tuesday, going to start updating it to just kind of aggregating where a bunch of the other bracketologists have K-State, so you can keep it all in one place, keep it in order. But Jerry Palm was who he updated his bracket today, still has K-State as a number 1 seed. So K-State's still getting some love from him, and obviously if they keep on the pace that they're on, they're going to be able to kind of keep this thing put together pretty strongly. So we'll see how it moves forward and what's next for K-State. That'll wrap it up. Short one. We'll have more on Wednesday, obviously, recapping the game. Alec and I will try and do something pregame tomorrow, so have something ready for you as well.